Live from Bryant-Denny Stadium with special guests, feature stories, and a comprehensive look at Alabama's upcoming game. This is Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
Good morning and happy game day, everybody. I'm Gary Harris, and you're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff. We're going to cover it all for you this morning. Let's go. As always, we begin with our Bama Headlines.
For the latest on the Crimson Tide, you don't need the newspaper. You need Bama Headlines.
Well, we hear about players being a game day decision. Nick Saban, it appears, is a game day decision. On Wednesday, Coach and Alabama's Director of Athletics, Greg Byrne, tested positive for coronavirus. Coach Saban has spoken at least 3 times since then, either through press conferences or on television, and says he doesn't have any symptoms. There is increasing optimism that Coach Saban, if he passes one more COVID test and it's negative, will be on the sideline tonight against Georgia. If he cannot, offensive coordinator Steve Sarkisian will serve as the acting head coach for the game against the Bulldogs. And the students continue to fail in their mission to topple the teacher. Alabama's 63-48 victory over Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss Saturday night in Oxford ran Saban's record to 21-0 against his former Crimson Tide and assistants elsewhere as well. 9 former Saban assistants have gone up against him as a head coach. Kirby Smart, Jim McElwain, Will Muschamp, Jeremy Pruitt, Kiffin, Jimbo Fisher, Derek Dooley, Mark D'Antonio, and Billy Napier. None of them have won. We'll have more on Saban's dominance later in the show. We got a stacked program for you, including some trends that may give you new perspective on Coach Saban's dominance in coaching against his former assistants, as we alluded to. Plus, interviews with Crimson Tide women's tennis coach Jenny Mainz and longtime Georgia beat writer Dog Nation's Mike Griffith in our Behind Enemy Lines segment. Well, it appears the chances of Nick Saban coaching tonight against Georgia are improving. Jeff Allen, UA Associate Athletics Director for Sports Medicine, released an updated statement Friday afternoon at 3:33. Let me read it to you. Coach Saban was evaluated again today by Dr. Robinson. He continues to be asymptomatic and without fever. We are continuing to follow the SEC Return to Activity and Medical Guidance Task Force protocol for testing asymptomatic positives. A PCR test was repeated Thursday by the SEC-appointed lab and was negative. For clarification, the initial positive result came from an outside lab we've used to supplement the SEC mandated testing. He will continue to remain in isolation and receive daily PCR tests should he have 3 negative PCR tests through the SEC appointed lab, each 24 hours apart. The initial test would be considered a false positive pursuant to SEC protocols, and he would be allowed to return. That's the statement. And Saban was on ESPN Game Day this morning with the latest on his condition.
The fact that we've had 240 tests in the last 2 days that were all negative, not one positive. The fact that I actually tested negative Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday popped, Thursday, Friday negative. So I have to trust in the doctors and the medical people who make these protocols safe for all of us. And our players have done a good job of practicing social distancing, and I think this experience has certainly made me have a lot of respect for what we should do, all of us should do relative to social distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands, staying apart, and we're going to continue to do that in the future.
One thing is for sure, tonight's game at Bryant-Denny Stadium is going to be strength on strength. 1 month into the season, Georgia's defense is for real. The Bulldogs are first in run defense and allow just 38 rushing yards per game. Georgia has yet to allow a rushing touchdown this season. In the second half of last week's victory over Tennessee, the Bulldogs surrendered less than a yard per carry. The Vols were held to -1 yards rushing after halftime total.
Or really anybody motivate me more, but like Georgia, if you look at what they've done to Tennessee last game, I think giving up 1 yard, I think rushing, I'm not too sure what it was, but that just motivates me more because that's just that like when you line up against them, like on the opposite side of the ball, it's straight dudes out there, like it's dogs really.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Alabama is number 2. Georgia is ranked 3rd, which makes this the 5th time these teams have played, both ranked in the top 5. Coach Saban, who we think we're going to see on the sideline, the odds are improving by the minute, so hopefully he'll be there. Coach has 85 victories over ranked opponents It's been 18 games since Georgia has allowed a rushing touchdown. But Najee Harris may not be alone in that fight against the Bulldogs defense. So far this season in 3 games, 3 different receivers have paced the offense through the air. And the Crimson Tide appears to have multiple options at running back, too. Brian Robinson has emerged as a strong complement to Najee Harris. Last week against Ole Miss, the former Hillcrest High School standout spelled Harris midway through the second quarter and did the job. The running game didn't miss a beat with Robinson, number 4, in place of Harris, number 22.
But I was really pleased with the way B-Rob came in and, got right to it when he got the opportunity and played with a lot of toughness and was very physical in the way he played and made, good cuts and maximized the plays that he got an opportunity.
All right, Chelsea, it doesn't take a meteorologist. I'm certainly not one, not ever going to be one. But I can look outside the window and say, my gosh, it's beautiful. When I walked out the door this morning, I said, my gosh, it feels great. And it appears we got more of the same all day, right?
Oh, yeah, the weather's looking great out there. No complaints here. If you have any plans to go to the game or just any plans outdoor today, today's the perfect time to do it. Currently dry on radar. We are going to continue to stay dry as that high pressure really wicks away all that moisture. Look at those beautiful blue skies. Not even a cloud in the sky. Temperatures sitting in the lower and mid 60s, feeling rather refreshing out there as we take a look across central Alabama. Going to see those lower and mid 60s. Some areas still sitting in the 50s. This is what we call when we are talking about fall weather. And again, all of this weather is dry as we have that northerly wind flow dew point at 31, bringing us drier and cooler air. As we go throughout the next couple of hours, we're going to reach a high in the lower and mid 70s, continuing to feel nice as we're well below average for this time of year. As you start the game, we're going to drop into possibly the upper 50s and lower 60s, and then by the end of the game, again, temperatures will start creeping into the lower 50s. So what is your game day forecast looking for as we take on Georgia today? Again, we'll reach a high in the lower and mid 70s, well below average temperatures, getting plenty doses of sunshine. It should feel great out there. And then by kickoff, again, skies will still continue to stay clear. We'll be dry. We'll be dipping into the upper 50s, lower 60s. And then by the end of the game, you might want to have that jacket handy as we'll be dipping into those lower and mid 50s, Gary.
Thank you, Chelsea. It's an absolutely perfect fall day. I wish we could have the normal amount of people in town. That coronavirus, wouldn't you just like to punch it? Well, coming up on CTKO, we'll talk with Tide women's tennis coach Jenny Mainz, and we'll hear about her shift from coach to fan. Also, more on Nick Saban's status as we try to figure out how likely it is that we'll see him tonight at the game against Georgia. Plus, we will try to put some new context to Coach Saban's well-documented success when coaching against his former assistant coaches. You won't want to miss it. Stick around. CTKO is coming right back.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
Welcome back to CTKO inside our beautiful WVUA 23 studio inside the Digital Media Center, which is located right here inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. It's really neat. Well, Nick Saban certainly has had an interesting week, having to prepare for Georgia and deal with a positive COVID-19 test. CTKO's Julia Westerman joins us live now from the UA campus just outside Bryant-Denny Stadium with the latest on Coach Saban's health and whether there's a chance or whether there's a change in his status for tonight's game. Julia?
Yeah, Gary, Alabama football fans were definitely shocked when they learned that head coach Nick Saban was COVID-19 positive in such an important game week.
As soon as Nick Saban was made aware that he had tested positive for COVID-19 on Wednesday, he left Malmore Athletic Facility to finish out the remainder of game week preparations from home. Saban tested positive along with Director of Athletics Greg Byrne from a daily PCR test. He was not expecting to test positive as he felt fine all week. Knowing the stakes that come with this football season in particular, he said the Crimson Tide has been prepared for something like this, no matter how inconvenient it may be.
In light of the fact that any coach could test positive, we try to have a protocol in place for if we lost a coach, especially one in a leadership position, who would, step in for them.
Alabama has a lot on the line against Georgia tonight. Going without Saban would be something the team has not done since 2006. NCAA rules currently prohibit remote coaching on game day. Should Saban not be on the sidelines tonight, he would not be able to communicate from home either. He continued to participate in practices from his home office.
I didn't leave the country or anything. I'm just right down the street, and we have this technology, so it's really unique. Now, I don't have any experience in this. But we're going to do the best we can to keep everything normal.
Following the SEC return to activity and medical guidance task force protocol, Saban needs to test negative on 3 consecutive days in order to return to coaching. Having tested positive Wednesday, his final negative test needs to be reported today. As for preparing for tonight's game, the coaching staff is doing all it can to put the players in the best position to win.
I haven't blocked anybody or tackled anybody, caught any passes, thrown any passes in a game for a long, long time. So it's still going to be up to how the players execute. Number one thing that I would be concerned about is, can the players still go out, focus on the game, play the game? It's a big game for them. Our goal as coaches is always to get them in the best position they can be in to be able to have success. And we need to try to continue to do that.
I'm sure Alabama football fans will be anxiously awaiting to find out if Saban can get that 3rd negative test today prior to game time tonight. Live for CTKO, I'm Julia Westerman.
And thanks, Julia. You sure Nick Saban, he's scheduled to turn 69 on Halloween. You sure it's not 29? I mean, this dude is tough. I'm expecting to see him tonight. Thank you for that great report. Well, CTKO's Matthew Travis spoke with Alabama women's tennis coach Jenny Mainz, who had to shift between being the Tide's coach and a fan watching one of her former players in the French Open.
That's right, Gary. I'm joined by Alabama women's tennis coach Jenny Mainz, who is currently in her 24th season as the Tide coach. And obviously, this offseason has been more difficult than any other you've dealt with. What has that been like, and how has that affected the current team?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's certainly been very difficult on everyone around the globe. And I know that a lot of people have been very, very ill and lost lives. And so I would just like to kind of first say that certainly our thoughts and prayers are with all of those that have been directly impacted with people that have had this pandemic, had the virus. And I have a lot of faith in our leaders, President Stuart Bell and Greg Byrne and our commissioner, Greg Sankey, and the SEC. I believe that we've handled it really well from a leadership standpoint at the University of Alabama. The guidelines and the protocol to keep everyone safe have been absolutely second to none.
So many coaches say the biggest improvement of the season comes from week 1 to week 2. Last weekend, you guys went up against several SEC teams in the SEC Challenge, and this weekend you'll be in Starkville taking on Ole Miss and Mississippi State. What did you learn last weekend, and where do you hope to see improvements this weekend?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. We've got a lot of work to do, and we know that. I think even coming into the season, we knew that we were going to have to knock off a lot of rust. And, these girls have not been playing the tournaments that they would normally be playing, but due to COVID haven't been able to. And I know that's the same for everybody. But, even through day 1, day 2, and day 3 of the tournament, you saw a vast improvement with the way they handled themselves, how they competed, how they kind of worked through things, how they figured things out. And I have confidence that that's going to continue to happen. And the big thing for us was we said, let's compete well. Let's control the controllables. Attitude, effort, energy, discipline, shot selection, our footwork, our movement, things that we know that we could control. Let's do a great job of handling those, and then let's build. Let's build, and put all the positives on top. So we're excited to get back out there in Starkville this weekend. And like I said, we saw a vast improvement through the weekend from day 1 to day 3 this past weekend.
And obviously Alexa Garaci, who you coached through 2012, made the doubles finals at the French Open this past weekend. What does it mean for your current players to see someone like Alexa competing on the highest stage in the world? And do you think that will motivate them knowing that someone who was in their shoes only a few years ago is now doing what she is?
Absolutely. That's probably the biggest message is, to believe in yourself, believe in your abilities, stay true to yourself. And, one of the things Fernando Garacci, Alexa's father, sent me, he said, tell the team to believe in themselves like Alexa has. And our team made a video and sent it to her before the semifinals. And, we were sending Alexa messages and her father, Fernando, and, there was a lot of engagement there. And I think the team realizes we have a team group text, and, people were like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. She was just here several years ago playing in the same conference, in the same situation as the rest of us. And, it's a testament to sticking to things and following your heart and following your dreams and hard work pays off. And I think the team sees that, hey, we can be there too. So we're appreciative for Alexa blazing the way so that these young players now playing here can do, hopefully be in her shoes in a couple years.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Coach Mainz, and good luck this weekend as Alabama heads to Starkville to compete against Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Follow along with WVUA 23 and CTKO all season for the latest on Alabama women's tennis. Now let's go back to Gary Harris.
Thank you. Roll Tide.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Coach. Interesting note on Coach Mainz. She is the longest tenured coach at the University of Alabama. Just a little tidbit. And she is a great, great person. Well, still to come on CTKO, just how dominant has Nick Saban been when coaching against his former assistant coaches? We've talked about it a lot already. We'll try to give you a different perspective, though, on Coach Saban's 21-0 streak. Plus, Mike Leach puts Hell State on notice this week, and Kentucky coach Mark Stoops made some travel changes the day before game day in Knoxville. We'll preview the other SEC matchups slated for today when we come back.
I think it got started more with your local club, like the Rotary Club, Exchange Club. I'd go to those. And obviously everybody here loved Alabama football, so it was a natural entree for me. And just mix in a few funny stories about football, and there's a lot of them that have happened. I remember one day we were at practice, and they had a tornado alert. And I remember standing there with Coach Bryant. There was just a cloud right over way, and he said, that son of a gun's going right at my house. But that wound practice up for that day. That tornado wouldn't dare hit his house. So we used to always ask the coach before a game. We go up and say, Coach, you gonna try anything new tonight? He said, we might move the damn ball forward. He said, if we do that, penalize us, because we ain't done it all year long.
Say it every week. I love Eddie Conyers. A little tidbit here. Kristen Saban-Cetus, the daughter of Nick Saban, has been tweeting out tidbits for you to follow. 1 heart, 2 heart, and now today 3 hearts, which I think is symbolic of the fact that Coach Saban has passed his test. And indeed, Cecil Hurt has just tweeted out, Alabama head coach Nick Saban has received a 3rd negative test and will coach against Georgia tonight. So some breaking news as we welcome you back in here to CTKO. According to Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News, Coach Saban has tested negative and will coach. I'm Gary Harris. It's been well documented that Coach Saban is unbeaten against his former assistants, but that really only tells a portion of the story. CTKO's Dylan Morgan has more.
There's been a lot of debate this week if tonight's game with Kirby Smart in Georgia deserves an asterisk if Coach Saban is unable to go on the sideline. Go ahead and argue that. There's no arguing this. Coach Saban's dominance during his 21-0 streak against his former assistant coaches.
Nick Saban is undefeated, taking down 9 former assistants, including coaches such as Jimbo Fisher, Will Muschamp, and Kirby Smart in the process. In those games, Saban's teams have won by a combined score of 904 to 356, scoring more points than Florida and Auburn combined for last season. From those games, Saban has led for a total of 837 minutes. Now, to To put that time into perspective for you, 837 minutes comes out to 13 hours and 57 minutes. That's the equivalent of how long it would take the average person to run 3.5 marathons, or like watching 4 full-length broadcasts of SEC football consecutively.
Here is my favorite one. 837 minutes is the same amount of time it would take to watch the movie Forrest Gump 6 times. Now raise your hand if you're guilty of that just during the last few months of quarantine alone. Reporting for CTKO, I'm Dylan Morgan. Back to you.
Well, thank you, Dylan. More on Coach Saban in just a moment. He has been cleared to return to activity. That's official from the University of Alabama. We'll get to that statement in just a little bit. Well, the prime time and prime rib dish on this weekend's SEC menu is certainly Georgia and Alabama, but there are some side dishes that are pretty tasty too. Let's check them out. CTKO's Kaylee Vance previews the other games around the SEC.
You know, Gary, you heard Nick Saban give a lot of credit to Georgia's defense this week. It's easy for that group to stand out when it's obviously head and shoulders above all of the other defenses in the SEC. Most of the league's teams are led by high-octane offenses, which can also be hit and miss.
So much for Mike Leach's air raid offense. After week 1, the Bulldogs looked to be one of the SEC's best offenses, but after their games in week 2 and 3, where Kentucky and Arkansas forced 9 interceptions, the Mississippi State offense doesn't seem to be what it first appeared.
I think we're going to have to kind of check some of our group and figure out who really wants to play here, because, you know, any malcontents, we're going to have to purge a couple of those.
J.J. Pegues seems to be one of the only things Auburn fans have to be excited about, and they're definitely looking for more. However, you can't get much more of the 300-pound tight end. Head coach Gus Malzahn said earlier this week that there is no name for this Wildcat formation featuring J.J. Pegues, but I would definitely expect that in the works. It's worth noting that Kentucky has not won in Knoxville in 36 years. Wildcats coach Mark Stoops promises a change-up, not in the game, but in the team's travel plans. Stoops didn't give details and would only say he's been thinking about this trip for some time.
2 games this week that were supposed to be played, LSU at Florida and Vanderbilt at Missouri, were postponed until later in the season due to issues with COVID-19. That has led to some changes in the television broadcast schedule. Ole Miss at Arkansas kick off at 2:30 and now will be on SEC Network, while Texas A&M at Missouri this afternoon at 3 p.m. will be seen on ESPN. That is around the SEC. Reporting for CTKO, Kaylee Vance. Back to you.
Thank you, Kaylee. Here's the entire slate of games around the SEC. 2 games are already underway, Auburn at South Carolina and Kentucky at Tennessee. And they're playing as we speak. 2 other SEC games were postponed, as we know, due to positive tests for COVID-19 with some of the teams. Florida and LSU will not be able to play, and Vanderbilt and Missouri will not be able to play as well. They're now rescheduled for December the 12th. Well, what's the national perspective on Nick Saban, and how will that affect tonight's game against Georgia? We'll hear from ESPN's Reese Davis after the break. And students are having major problems purchasing tickets for this season's football games, with a stadium capacity of only around 20%. Stick around to learn more about what they're trying to do to get into the ball games. That's coming up on CTKO. Welcome back to CTKO. I'm Gary Harris. The breaking news from the University of Alabama: Coach Saban is medically cleared to safely return to activity effective immediately. So that obviously clears the way for him to coach tonight. Well, although COVID-19 will prevent a normal game day atmosphere in Tuscaloosa, students and fans are doing everything they can to get into Bryant-Denny Stadium. While there would typically not be an empty seat in sight, especially during a rivalry like this one against Georgia tonight, capacity still remains at 20% for the safety of the fans. Tickets are still available to purchase for the public. However, since demand is extremely high, the university is having to make some changes to their ticketing process this season, even for those paying tuition, the students. Here's CTKO's Tatum Vaught with more.
Previously, students would purchase an entire ticket package for the whole season at the beginning of the year in the upper or lower bowl based on their grade classification. The new system the university developed doesn't seem to be sitting well with students.
This was the one game all season I was really looking forward to going to, and like all my friends from high school that go to Georgia, we're like been talking trash about it since the summer about who's gonna win.
I think that the process for giving out tickets is not very clear. Like, I have no idea how it was decided. We were told that a certain percentage of each grade would get one, but based on just the people I know, which to be fair isn't the whole university, but I don't know a single senior that got one, and I know a couple of underclassmen that did.
Students are having to opt in the week prior to each game for their tickets this fall. According to the Tide Pride Ticket Office, tickets are awarded by grade status and UA earned credit hours rather than by seniority or Tide loyalty points. Each grade has a certain percentage chance of getting a ticket, classified as followed: seniors 40%, juniors 20%, sophomores 15%, freshmen 15%, and graduate students 10%.
We reached out to the Alabama ticket office and they did not want to comment on the ticket process. According to an email sent to all students at the beginning of the year, students will be limited to attending 2 games via the opt-in process for the entire season in hopes to give all students a chance to attend. If you do not opt in for every game, the odds of you attending 2 home games go down.
I specifically didn't opt in for Texas A&M, so I'd be able to hopefully get a Georgia ticket, hoping like it'd be my first opt-in attempt that I'd be able to get one, and I still didn't get one.
The problem is not just the ticket demand. It appears the suspicion is some of those requesting tickets will look to resell for profit on Facebook and other social media sites. All student tickets cost $23, but as of Thursday afternoon, some of the prices for student tickets we found online were averaging around $200 or more.
I know a lot of people are really angry, and the people who did get one are selling it for like $500 or more, which is ridiculous.
As of now, the Tide looks like a clear contender for another championship, but the fans just wish they had a better view. For Crimson Tide Kickoff, Tatum Vaught reporting.
Thank you, Tatum. Of course, tens of thousands of students and fans want to be in the stadium, but again, the limited capacity is restricting those numbers, at least for now. Well, Coach Saban, going into this morning, we were talking about his possible absence from the game Saturday and how that could impact more than just the score. Of course, now we know that he has been cleared for activity immediately. CTKO's William Galloway, though, joins us live from the UA campus to break down what this might have meant for the record books. William?
Hey, Gary. Well, we know there was a lot of speculation around Coach Saban, and now that speculation is out the window with the breaking news that his test came back negative. So we know Coach Saban is 21-0 versus former assistants, and if Kirby Smart were to be the first one to beat him tonight, we were wondering if that was going to impact his record in terms of does it go down with a win or a loss. Well, we don't have to worry about answering that question anymore because Coach Saban will be on the sideline. And yesterday when we talked to Reese Davis of ESPN and College Game Day, of course, Reese, an Alabama alum, he spoke to us and he said, you know, I think it should count because it's his team and his program.
I would say that I think it's still his program, his game, his team, and his game, win or lose. And there, you know, if Kirby is the first assistant to beat one of his teams and he happens not to be there, there will, I don't know if asterisk is the right word, maybe just a little small check mark will be beside that one, you know, until someone else does it. But it's sort of my feeling that his imprint is so large on this program and on this team that even if he's not able to be on the sideline, it's still his team and his game. And I would think that the most historically accurate thing to do would be to have it reflect on his record.
And now we know for sure that it will impact his record tonight. Kickoff is at 7 p.m. right behind me in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Reporting live for CTKO, I'm William Galloway.
Thanks, William. Great job. As I said, we were all expecting this, but now that we know he's been cleared to safely return to activity immediately, it just gets a little more hype for this game tonight. Well, coming up next on CTKO, we will have the Byrne Point with Alabama Director of Athletics, Greg Byrne. And a little later on, William Galloway will take us to the other side of this game when he goes behind enemy lines and talks to Georgia reporter Mike Griffith. Keep it dialed in right here to CTKO. I'm Gary Harris. Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff and another edition of the Byrne Point with the University of Alabama Director of Athletics, Greg Byrne. This week, we're going to talk about the Malmore Athletic Facility renovations, as well as the incredible Sports Science Center. You've probably seen the videos out on social media. I've run some of the videos on my Sportscast because it's absolutely unbelievable. I already thought Malmore was as good a facility for athletics as I've seen anywhere in the country, Greg. And now with the renovations there, bigger, better, and the Sports Science Center, there's so much to cover. I want to start, though, just with the locker room there, because it was already nice, but we've seen the videos. It now is state of the art. I've been told that the players sometimes, coaches have to come in there and get them out of their locker to practice because they're fall asleep and just relaxing in this incredible locker room they now have.
Yeah, obviously, people kind of think about the locker room. I often think about over at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Well, the locker room here at Malmore is what we use 90% of the time. And just like any space, as when you have 18 to 22-year-olds, you have about 120 of them in one area. It starts to show its age, and that's where we were with our old locker room in some of our areas here in Malmore. And so we wanted to make sure we did something that was represented who we are, which we want to be great in everything that we do, and wanted to have some pop and sizzle to it when recruits would come in and when our guys are there. And so I think as what you all saw on social media, I got to be with the captains when they, or the seniors, excuse me, when they got to see it for the first time, and they were blown away with it. And it's great space. And so much of you think, well, hey, you just go in and change and all that. A lot of what we have focused on with the improvements to Malmore and the Sports Science Center is the total experience for our student athlete from a total body standpoint, making sure that they're developing who they are physically, mentally, but also recovering. And recovery is now such a big part of that, making sure everybody's getting the rest they need. And so we have the zero gravity chairs in their lockers so they can just, if you've never sat in one, I've had back problems for years. You sit in one of those, all the pressure goes off your back. It's dispersed evenly amongst your body, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing for our student athletes to help them recover to be the maximum, get the maximum of their ability that the good Lord's given them. And so the locker room is going to be a real shining star for what we're doing.
Indeed, it is. Locker room, equipment room, athletic training room, the lobby, all have been renovated at Malmore. And you alluded to the Sports Science Center, and science is never a strong point of mine, but I can be impressed even if I don't understand all the different things that have gone into the Sports Science Center. I mean, it is unbelievable. That's just the best word I can use. Again, even as somebody who doesn't understand all of the science behind it, I'm impressed, and I know the student athletes just must absolutely be in heaven when, you never want to have an injury, you never want to have to rehab, but if you have to do that, and oftentimes you do as an athlete, you've got a facility that you never have to leave the campus to get the best treatment that you can get anywhere in the world.
Yeah, again, just we want to make sure that our student athletes, that our recruits understand we're going to be at the front end from what we do from a medical standpoint. And I'll tell you, early, I've been around this long enough now. Early in my career, when in recruiting with your student athletes, you say, well, there's the training room. That's where you get your ankles taped, and you may get a bag of ice. And it's evolved so much more than that now. And families are asking, tell us how you're supporting our student athlete or our son or our daughter from a total wellness standpoint, not as only physically, but also mentally, from a mental health standpoint. And so with the Sports Science Center that we have, we've got a state-of-the-art training room. It's got a lot of pop and sizzle when you walk in, great graphics, great area to be in. And then all of our rehabilitation areas are new pools that we have in there, the equipment that we have that's specifically designed for rehabilitation. We have our cryotherapy, we have our sleep areas, we have our mental health rooms, we have our medical rooms. And again, it's something that nobody else to this level has, and we are very proud of it. And it's going to allow us to continue to recruit at the levels that we want, and in some ways, I think even put us in a better position going forward.
Jeff Allen does an unbelievable job and has for many years. Greg, I don't know I've ever seen in my years of sportscasting a strength and conditioning staff with David Ballou and Dr. Matt Rea coming in here from the University of Indiana that has created as much buzz as these two gentlemen have. They've become social media stars to some extent just because the science that they're applying in terms of workouts and training for these athletes, it has just been embraced not only by the student athletes but by the fan base and anybody that's followed what they're doing there. It's got to be exciting for you as an AD to see a couple of guys come in and be greeted and loved the way they already are.
Yeah, so it was interesting when they came in here to interview. Coley Stickles, who's our swim coach that we hired from Indiana University about a year and a half ago. I remember when we interviewed Coley, he was talking to me about what they were doing from a strength and conditioning standpoint at Indiana on some things I just really, again, been around it my whole life, I'd never really heard of. And so when we had the opening and we had to hire a new head of strength and conditioning for our program, their names came up. Coach Saban brought them to town, and I was downstairs in our dining hall having lunch with them. And I think it was Dylan Moses. And Dylan Moses saw them because they had been at IMG before they went up to Indiana. And Dylan came over, and, Dylan's really steady Eddie, right? He just, he's got a great smile. He's a great young man. But he out on the football field, he does, he goes at it hard and all that, but he's pretty steady Eddie off the field. Well, he got so excited when he saw these guys. I'm like, hey, how about that? And to see the way our guys have responded and bought into it and the influence they're having on all of our sports, and our student athletes have bought in big time, and they just have a great presence to them. Dr. Ray's science with Ballou's just overall program that they work together cohesively, that's putting us in a really good spot. And I think combine that with the Sports Science Center, combine that with the great facilities we have in nutrition and obviously strength and conditioning as well, it's really going to do a great thing for our football program and all of our programs to make sure that conditioning and nutrition and recovery is as good done here as well as any place in the country at Alabama.
Yeah, I want to correct something I said. I think I said University of Indiana. You said it correctly. Indiana University. Don't want the good folks at IU to get mad at me, but we're certainly glad to have them here at the University of Alabama. Next week, we're going to focus on the student athletes as students and as people. Of course, obviously, there's a lot of social awareness going on these days, and Alabama has a civic engagement initiative, Make an Impact, that we're going to discuss next week on The Byrne Point. For Greg Byrne, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again next week. Welcome back to CTKO. I'm Gary Harris. It's time to go behind enemy lines. William Galloway spoke with Mike Griffith of the AJC's Dog Nation. William?
Hey, Gary. I had a great conversation with Mike earlier this week about this upcoming top 5 matchup, one of the best games of this season, and he said it's just another game for Georgia.
Kirby keeps his team pretty focused from one week to the next. They've got that mentality that it's just another game. Obviously, the stakes are higher in terms of national television, the rivalry, the history. Motivation hasn't been a factor at practice this week, as you might imagine. This is kind of what Georgia's been building towards this season, a game that's been circled on the calendar for a while.
Stetson Bennett will be under center for the Bulldogs. With 3 games under his belt this season, Griffith feels Bennett has found his rhythm.
He gets rid of the ball quickly, and Georgia's going to throw a lot of 3-4 receiver routes. You're going to see 2 tight ends at times. They've got good tight ends as well. Obviously, Alabama's been exploited there, but Stetson likes throwing over the middle. Most of their passes are within 20 yards. It's a short, controlled pass game, efficient. And as I said, he's got good mobility. He's hard to get, and he can scramble for yardage as well.
Defensively for the Crimson Tide, lots needs to be improved after last week's performance at Ole Miss. But this is a new week and a new opponent.
The Georgia offense doesn't resemble the Ole Miss offense. I mean, the Ole Miss offense is talented. Talking with Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl executive director and former NFL scout, says, hey, there's 5 or 6 NFL guys on that Ole Miss offense. There may be 5 or 6 NFL guys on the Georgia offense, but they haven't grown up yet.
That lack of experience for Georgia will be beneficial for the recovering Alabama defense. Meanwhile, the Bulldog defense is second in the league in total sacks and interceptions. Griffith said that Kirby Smart's defense is anchored by its secondary.
They are good in the secondary. They're very solid. But they've been solid against Alabama before in the secondary, right? And they haven't seen a pass game like Alabama, I don't think. I mean, it's just different.
Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, and John Mechie plan to be as disruptive as possible in tonight's game.
Now, Alabama has won the last 5 games against Georgia in this historic matchup, and they go way back. Live for CTKO outside Bryant-Denny Stadium, I'm William Galloway.
Thank you, William. Thanks, obviously, to Mike Griffith of Dog Nation. All right, a lot of focus on the matchup, Alabama's offense against Georgia's defense. Both are going to be tested. There's no doubt about that. And also the coaching situation with Smart versus Saban. But the Georgia players say they want to just keep the focus on one thing, and that's playing the game.
We are going to treat this like anything else. Like, even if it was the SEC championship or like just a regular season game, like and like it is now. I know for a fact, like the players in the locker room, we just trying to go 1-0 every week, and we just doing anything. We just trying to do anything in our way to do that.
Hey, we all want to come out of there with a W on Saturdays. That's what it's about. So, I mean, I just being able to come back when it gets tough and facing adversity is something that we really pride ourselves on around here. When things get tough, when it gets hot outside, when it rains, when it gets humid, whatever the adversity may be, we really pride ourselves on just being a team that overcomes adversity.
And we'll be back after this.
Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Lynn Brooks alongside our resident coronavirus expert, Dr. Richard Friend. So glad you could be with us.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, the Capstone has its very first home football game under its belt now. So what are the takeaways? What did we learn?
Well, I think we learned that our fans and our campus community are doing a really good job following our protocols. We had very few incidents. I think everybody followed what we had laid out, which was not to gather in crowds, to wear face coverings properly, and to social distance in the stadium. And I think our numbers for last week really reflect what a good job everybody did.
So everybody gets A+?
We'll say an A.
Don't want to be too, you don't want to be too optimistic there, but for all those Alabama fans who did come out, it sounds like everybody did a great job. So that's the good news. Now we're going to start welcoming in fans from other schools in the SEC. You know, SEC football is going on across the Southeast. So now we're hosting another SEC team. Any concerns along those lines?
Well, I think it's no secret that other SEC schools, at least on television, really haven't followed the protocols as well as we have. Mm-hmm. And I think we all need to be extremely careful. I think that's based on individual state mandates and individual university mandates. But I think we all really need to be respectful of the protocols that UA has outlined, even for visiting fans. And as the stakes get higher with SEC football and the games get more meaningful and exciting, right, I think the tendency is going to be to get complacent, and we need to watch out for that.
We don't need to get complacent. We sure don't. So what behaviors are you seeing, just observationally, what behaviors are you seeing with football fans that are really of concern to you?
Well, we saw across the SEC fans in large groups within the stadium, many of them not wearing face coverings, if at all. We saw a lot of eating and drinking, which we know is a risk factor, even in an outdoor setting. We saw one SEC coach ask the administration to have 90,000 fans packed in the stadium for another SEC game, which is definitely not a good idea.
Because we are certainly not out of the woods yet with COVID, and just because you're having a good time, that doesn't mean that you can let your guard down.
That's right. As quickly as we saw those numbers go up early in the semester, we need to be very careful and make sure that they stay at manageable levels as they are now.
Now, also, you mentioned eating and drinking, and that not only happens in the stadium, but oftentimes if you're coming to a town and you're coming to the football game, well, you're from another place, or you're going to visit the restaurant, you might go out to a bar. Is that a high-risk activity if I'm a football fan?
That really is. I think there's some recent data that now has shown that bars and restaurants where you can't practice those safety measures you're much more likely to contract COVID in those areas. And it's everybody's natural tendency in those settings to want to congregate and be together, but you can't wear a mask and social distance. At least you can't wear a mask when you're eating and drinking.
Just to play devil's advocate a little bit, what if somebody says, well, I'm not sick. I feel fine. I'm good to go. I've been to the game. I'm in a great mood. Let's go out. What do you say to that person?
Well, we know that at least 40% of cases are transmitted while people are asymptomatic. And so
what's the percentage?
At least 40%.
40% have no symptoms.
Have no symptoms.
Wow.
And so certainly for those folks that are symptomatic, you want to avoid coming to the game. But even if you have no symptoms, you're still at risk for transmitting the virus.
So remember that, folks. Even if you're not sick, even if you feel well, you can still put somebody else at risk. Now, there's lots more information about coronavirus and any concerns anyone may have, and that's available online, right?
That information is updated regularly at healthinfo.ua.edu.
And what type of things can we find there?
You can find our protocols. You can find a lot of answers to frequently asked questions. And you can find testing and other protocols on there as well.
Any final advice for all of those football fans watching us today?
Be safe and roll tide.
On that note, be safe and roll tide. Dr. Richard Friend, we appreciate your advice and tips as always.
Thank you for having me.
Stick around. More Crimson Tide Kickoff to come.
You talk about a jam-packed show. We are out of time, but Chelsea Aaron says the weather's just going to be fantastic today. For everybody here at CTKO, I'm Gary Harris. Roll Tide.